Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are opening, well, really an astonishing chapter of ancient history. We're talking about a detailed vision written down centuries before it actually happened.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible stuff.
We are diving deep into Daniel chapter 8.
And this chapter, it's pivotal, not just for the content itself, but also structurally. We've talked before about how the middle chapters of Daniel were in Aramaic.
Right, the international language focused on the Gentile world.
Exactly, because that focus was broad, God's plan for all nations, you could say. But here, in chapter 8, it snaps back.
Back to Hebrew.
Back to Hebrew, the language of the covenant of Israel's specific story. And that shift, that linguistic change, it's like a spotlight turning. It tells you, okay, now we're zoning back in on God's plan specifically for his people, Israel, especially after that huge trauma of the Babylonian exile.
And the vision Daniel gets is, well, it's intense. Overwhelming, maybe.
Definitely overwhelming. He sees these two symbolic animals. First, a powerful ram with two horns.
And then this super fast male goat, one big horn.
Right, and then comes this other figure, a little horn, which sounds mysterious and, frankly, pretty dangerous.
So our mission today for you listening is to be your historical shortcut. We're going to take these symbols from Daniel 8
The ram, the goat, the horns.
and match them directly to the empires that came after Babylon. We're talking Medo-Persia, Greece.
Figures like Cyrus the Great, Alexander the Great, they slot right into this prophetic picture.
It's amazing how precise it is.
Yeah.
And we think the payoff intellectually and historically when you see these connections is just huge. It really shows this sovereign plan unfolding.
Okay, so Daniel starts describing this ram. It's standing by a river, sort of poised, ready,
Yeah, by the river Ulai, the text says.
and it has two horns. But there's a key detail, isn't there, about the horns?
A critical detail. One horn is higher than the other, and get this, the higher one grew up later. That tells you something about the power dynamic within this empire.
And this ram isn't just standing there, it's charging. West, north, south, violently charging, pushing everything out of its way. Daniel says, no beast could withstand him. That paints a picture of just sheer dominance, right? Scale and power.
And unlike some of Daniel's earlier visions, this one gets interpreted almost immediately. No suspense.
Right, the angel Gabriel steps in and explains. The ram you saw, that represents the kings of Media and Persia, the Medo-Persian Empire.
So the two horns, that makes sense. It's a
Okay.
dual empire.
Perfectly.
Yeah.
And it reflects the history. Initially, when the Medes and Persians teamed up, Media was the senior partner, you could say. That's the lower horn, the first one.
But the later horn, the higher one.
That's Persia. It grew later but became dominant. It symbolizes the rising power of the Persians within that alliance.
And the figure who embodies this shift is Cyrus the Great.
Exactly. Cyrus, he was Persian. And in a pretty remarkable political move, he actually overthrew his own grandfather, Astyages.
His godfather. Wow.
Yeah, who was the king of the Medes. So Cyrus unites them under Persian leadership, really establishing the massive Persian Empire we know from history.
And this empire conquered Babylon in 539 BCE, fulfilling that image of the ram just pushing aside all competitors.
Absolutely. And when you look at where the ram charged west towards, Asia Minor, Lydia, even brushing up against Greece, north into Central Asia, south towards Egypt, that maps perfectly onto the expansion of the Achaemenid Persian Empire under Cyrus and his successors. It was huge.
Okay, so they conquered this vast territory. But you mentioned the way they ruled was different, and that's crucial.
Crucial, especially when you contrast it with Babylon. This is key for understanding why God would use Persia in his plan.
Babylon was about assimilation, right? Force everyone to be Babylonian.
Total assimilation
All right.
and brutal relocation.
Yeah.
They didn't just conquer lands. They tried to erase national identities, destroy religions. That's why they dragged the Israelites out of Jerusalem, smashed the temple.
Yeah.
They wanted to break their spirit, their connection to their God and land.
Complete cultural destruction, basically.
Pretty much. Now, the Persians, they had a totally different playbook. They were actually famous for their, relative tolerance. They often respected local customs, religions, even local leadership structures.
How did they manage such a huge, diverse empire then?
Sophisticated administration. They divided it into provinces called satrapies, each with a governor or satrap. They built a royal road for communication, very organized. But the linchpin, policy-wise, was often allowing conquered peoples to maintain their ways, even sometimes supporting their local cults or temples. And crucially, repatriation.
Repatriation.
Yeah.
Meaning allowing people to go back home.
Yes. And this policy specifically was the tool God used. It's what allowed the Israelites, after 70 years in exile, just like Jeremiah prophesied, to return to Jerusalem.
To rebuild the temple, rebuild their city.
Exactly. Now, this wasn't necessarily because Cyrus had a soft spot for the Jews. It was part of a broader imperial strategy to keep peace and stability across this enormous multicultural empire. Happy subjects are less likely to revolt.
Makes sense from a political view.
But the prophecy shows us that even this sensible political strategy was part of God's script. Which brings us to this really fascinating point. God using a pagan king.
Because Cyrus wasn't a follower of the God of Israel.
Not at all. Historical sources link him strongly with Zoroastrianism. Maybe not exactly as it developed later, but certainly involving fire worship, Ahura Mazda. A completely different religious world.
Yet the prophet Isaiah, writing over a century before Cyrus was even born, calls him God's anointed one. Messiah, essentially.
It's staggering. Isaiah 45:1. God says he's grasping Cyrus's right hand, empowering him to subdue nations, opening doors before him, doors that won't be shut. It's like God clearing the path for him.
And history confirms Cyrus issued the decree allowing the Jews back. He even funded the temple rebuilding, didn't he, from the Persian treasury?
He did. The Cyrus Cylinder archaeological find backs up this general policy of repatriation and support for local cults. So, the Bible and history align here remarkably.
So what's the big takeaway from God using Cyrus?
It shows God's absolute sovereignty over all nations, all rulers. It doesn't matter what their personal beliefs are, whether they acknowledge him or not. They are still instruments in his hand.
Pawns on his chessboard, maybe?
Or perhaps tools is a better word. Used to accomplish his specific redemptive purposes, like bringing his people back home to fulfill covenant promises. Think about what that meant for the Jews in exile.
Hope. Vindication, maybe?
Immense hope. Seeing mighty Babylon fall, not to them, but to this Persian king God had named centuries before. It proved God was still in control, even when they were scattered and powerless.
And that's a lesson for us too, right? When things look bleak geopolitically.
Absolutely. God's plan unfolds across empires and centuries. Our current anxieties, while real to us, are part of a much larger controlled narrative. He can use anyone, any power, to achieve his ends, even a Zoroastrian fire worshiper.
It forces you to reconsider where true power lies. It's not always in the obvious places.
Okay, so the Medo-Persia is established. Huge, powerful, seemingly stable. But then, as Daniel is watching this vision, boom, total shift.
The male goat appears from the west, and the key thing is speed.
Phenomenal speed. The description is so vivid, its feet did not touch the ground. It's metaphorical, obviously, but it conveys this sense of unprecedented velocity. A blitzkrieg, almost.
And this goat doesn't just show up, it attacks the ram. Furious.
With incredible fury, hits the ram, shatters its two horns, tramples it. Complete annihilation of the Medo-Persian power.
The speed is emphasized again and again. Now, this goat has a horn, too.
A very noticeable one. A great horn, right between its eyes. And again, the angel Gabriel interprets, this great horn is the first king of Greece, or more accurately, Macedon, which unified Greece.
Alexander the Great has to be.
No question, Alexander the Great. His campaigns were legendary for their speed and decisiveness. He just sliced through the massive Persian Empire in a ridiculously short amount of time. Asia Minor, Syria, Egypt, Persia itself, all the way to India.
So that image of feet not touching the ground, it fits perfectly with his lightning campaigns.
Absolutely. Think about the logistics. Persia was vast, established, wealthy, huge armies. Alexander, starting with a smaller force from Macedon and Greece, just rolled over them through brilliant tactics, speed, and just relentless drive. He defeated Darius III, the last Persian king, and the ram was broken.
But the prophecy doesn't stop there. There's another twist.
A dramatic one. Right at the height of the goat's power, when Alexander has conquered everything, the great horn is broken.
Alexander died, young, unexpectedly, in Babylon, his empire at its absolute peak.
32 years old, I think. Just incredible. And the prophecy foretells exactly what happens next.
The four horns.
Precisely. In place of that one broken horn, four prominent horns sprout up, pointing towards the four winds of heaven, meaning in all directions.
And historically, this is the breakup of Alexander's empire.
Exactly. It was too vast, too centered on him personally to hold together after his sudden death. His leading generals, the Diadochi, which means successors, fought over it and carved it up.
The prophecy says four prominent ones. Who were they?
History confirms 4 main players emerged from the chaos. You had Cassander, who eventually controlled Macedonia and Greece itself.
Okay.
Symmachus took Thrace and parts of Asia Minor. But the two most important ones for the story of Daniel and for Israel.
Are Ptolemy and Seleucus.
Right. Ptolemy Soissarter grabbed Egypt and founded the Ptolemaic dynasty, ruling from Alexandria. That's the kingdom to the south of Judea.
And a Seleucus.
Seleucus and Nicator got the largest chunk, Syria, Mesopotamia, Persia, all the way to India, the Seleucid Empire. That's the kingdom to the north and east of Judea.
So Judea, the beautiful land, as Daniel calls it, is now sandwiched right between these two powerful successor kingdoms.
Precisely.
Mm.
Stuck between the Ptolemies in the south and the Seleucids in the north. And for the next couple of centuries, control of Judea became this constant tug-of-war between them. Jerusalem changed hands multiple times.
That sounds like a recipe for instability and conflict.
Constant conflict. It sets the stage perfectly, this volatile environment, for the next major figure in the prophecy to emerge from one of those four horns, most dangerous one yet.
Okay, let's pause here and unpack this a bit. We see military conquests, Persia falls, Greece rises, then splits. But why is this Greek period so important in the bigger picture of God's plan? It seems like more than just changing rulers.
Oh, much more. It's about a cultural tidal wave that changed the world permanently. Hellenization.
Spreading Greek culture.
Exactly. Before Alexander, Greece itself was this collection of often warring city-states, Athens, Sparta, Thebes. But they shared a common language, a common religion, the pantheon of gods, Zeus and all that.
And they'd already developed incredibly influential ideas.
Hugely influential. Politically, you got the origins of democracy in Athens. Militarily, think of Spartan discipline. That story of the 300 Spartans holding off the Persians at Thermopylae wasn't just a battle. It was a cultural statement about Greek martial values.
And philosophy.
The bedrock of Western thought. Socrates, Plato, Aristotle. Their ideas about reason, logic, ethics, metaphysics. They shaped everything that came after, including how Christian theology would eventually be articulated. Plus, their arts, architecture, sculpture, the classical ideal.
So Alexander didn't just conquer land. He exported this entire highly developed cultural package.
He actively promoted it. He founded cities across his empire, named many Alexandria, like the famous one in Egypt. These became centers of Greek language, learning, culture, administration. Greek culture became the dominant, prestigious culture across the Near East and Mediterranean.
But you mentioned the language aspect earlier. That seems key.
Absolutely critical, especially from a biblical perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Alexander's conquest didn't just spread Greek culture, they spread the Greek language, specifically Koine Greek.
Koine, meaning common.
Common Greek, exactly.
Yeah.
It became the lingua franca, the universal language of trade, administration, and educated discourse throughout the Hellenistic world, from Italy to India.
Replacing Aramaic in a way, or supplementing it.
Supplementing Aramaic in some areas, replacing it as the high-status language in others. And Koine Greek wasn't just common, it was incredibly precise.
Precise. How?
Grammatically, it had a very nuanced verb system, cases for nouns. It could express complex ideas, abstract concepts, logical arguments with remarkable clarity and detail, much more so than, say, Hebrew or Aramaic at the time.
Okay, I think I see where you're going with this.
God was preparing the world linguistically. Hundreds of years before Christ, he used Alexander's conquests to establish a single, precise language across the Roman world to be.
So that when the New Testament was written.
It could be written in Koine Greek. A language understood by millions across the empire, from educated Romans to merchants in Egypt to people in Asia Minor, and a language capable of conveying the deep theological truths of the gospel redemption, justification, the nature of God, with accuracy.
Instead of being limited to just Hebrew or Aramaic speakers, wow, that's long-term planning.
Centuries long, and
Right.
goes even deeper. During this Greek period, something else monumentally important happened.
What's that?
The translation of the Hebrew Old Testament into Greek.
The Septuagint.
The Septuagint, exactly. Often abbreviated LXX for the 70-ish scholars traditionally said to have done the translation, probably in Alexandria.
Why is that so important?
Two huge reasons. First, many Jews lived outside Judea by then, the diaspora. They'd grown up speaking Greek, not Hebrew. The Septuagint gave them access to their own scriptures in a language they understood.
Okay, keeping the faith alive for dispersed Jews.
And second, the Septuagint became the Bible of the early Christian church. The apostles, writing the New Testament, often quoted from the Greek Septuagint, not the Hebrew text directly,
Right.
because they were writing primarily to a Greek-speaking audience. The Septuagint provided the common scriptural ground, the vocabulary, the concepts already familiar in the Hellenized world, to explain how Jesus fulfilled the prophecies. It bridged the gap between the Hebrew tradition and the Gentile world.
So the Greek conquest wasn't just military, it was cultural and linguistic preparation for the gospel.
Absolutely. God used this pagan empire and its language to create the perfect environment for the New Testament message to spread like wildfire a few centuries later. It's really quite profound when you trace it.
Okay, so we have the Greek Empire split into four kingdoms, Hellenization spreading, Koine Greek becoming dominant, even the Old Testament translated into Greek. The stage is set.
The stage is definitely set, and now the prophecy zooms in on the real antagonist of this chapter. Daniel 8, verse 9. It says that out of one of those four horns,
One of the successor kingdoms.
right, specifically, history shows it's the Seleucid kingdom based in Syria. Out of that horn comes a little horn.
Little, but it grows.
It grows exceedingly great. And notice the directions towards the south, that's Egypt fighting the Ptolemies,
Yeah.
towards the east, pushing into Parthia and beyond, and crucially, towards the beautiful land.
Judea, Israel.
Yes, it focuses its power against God's people and land. And the angel gives a description of this king's character. He will be fierce of countenance or stern-faced.
Sounds intimidating.
And he will understand dark sentences or enigmas or intrigue. It implies someone cunning, ruthless, politically astute, maybe even dabbling in the occult or hidden schemes.
This isn't symbolic of an empire anymore, is it? This sounds like a specific person.
Exactly. This is widely identified, and I mean, the historical fit is just uncanny, as Antiochus IV Epiphanes.
Epiphanes. Didn't you say that means something?
It means God manifest. Antiochus V literally put that title on his coins. He saw himself as Zeus incarnate, a god walking the earth, which tells you a lot about his ego and his agenda.
So he's a king from the Seleucid line, ruling from Syria.
Reigned from 175 down to 164 BCE. And his goal wasn't just political control over Judea. He wanted to completely eradicate Judaism. Total, forced Hellenization.
How did he try to do that?
By attacking the core pillars of Jewish identity and faith, the things that made them distinct, he outlawed the Mosaic Law.
Forbid it completely.
Completely. No more circumcision. No observing the Sabbath. No celebrating the biblical feasts like Passover. He burned copies of the Torah. Anyone caught practicing these things faced execution.
This is religious persecution on a massive scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
He wanted to force them to adopt Greek customs, Greek religion, worship Greek gods, to become Greeks, essentially, and forget Yahweh.
And the prophecy mentions the sanctuary.
Ah, yes, the ultimate violation.
Yeah.
Daniel 8:11 says this horn would magnify himself even against the prince of the host, God or his high priest, take away the daily sacrifices from him, and cast down the place of his sanctuary,
The temple in Jerusalem.
the temple itself.
Yeah.
Antiochus marched into Jerusalem, stopped the legitimate sacrifices to Yahweh, and then committed the ultimate outrage.
What did he do?
He set up an altar to Zeus Olympius inside the temple precinct. And then, the historian Josephus and the books of Maccabees tell us, he sacrificed a pig on it.
A pig, the most unclean animal under Jewish law, on the holy altar.
Exactly. It was the most calculated, deliberately defiling act imaginable, designed to desecrate the holiest site, break the covenant, and show contempt for Jewish faith. He even forced Jews to eat pork. This event became known as the Abomination of Desolation.
Abomination of desolation. That phrase echoes later, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. Jesus himself refers back to it when predicting the destruction of the temple in his time, and it features prominently in end times prophecy. Antiochus V becomes the historical prototype for the ultimate Antichrist figure.
That fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences, how does that connect to him historically?
Well, he was known for being unpredictable, ruthless in his political dealings, especially his wars against Egypt, the Ptolemies. He used intrigue, diplomacy, and sheer brutality. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a cunning tyrant who specifically targeted the heart of Israel's relationship with God. He truly was a little horn that cast a very long, dark shadow. So Antiochus V pushes this brutal persecution, forced Hellenization, temple desecration. It looked like Judaism might actually be wiped out in Judea.
But it backfired, didn't it?
Massively. His tyranny became the catalyst for revolt, the Maccabean revolt.
How did it start?
It kicked off in a small village called Modane. One of Antiochus's officers came and set up a pagan altar, ordering the Jews there to offer sacrifice. The local priest, an old man named Mattathias, refused.
He stood up to them.
He did, and when another Jew stepped forward, ready to comply with the order, Mattathias was enraged. He killed the complying Jew and the king's officer right there at the altar. Then he tore down the altar and cried out, "Let everyone who is zealous for the law and supports the covenant follow me."
Wow, that's a declaration of war.
It was. He and his 5 sons fled to the hills, and it sparked this guerrilla war against the Seleucid forces. Not an organized army at first, just passionate resistance fighters.
And one of his sons became the main leader.
Yes, Judah. His most famous son, he was apparently a brilliant tactician. He earned the nickname Maccabee.
Maccabee. What does that mean?
It's usually thought to mean the hammer, maybe because of how forcefully he struck the enemy.
So Judah the Hammer leads this revolt against a professional Seleucid army.
A vastly superior army. It was a desperate David and Goliath kind of struggle.
Yeah.
But through courage, knowledge of the terrain, and believers would say divine help, they won some key victories.
And eventually,
Against all odds, in 165, maybe late 164 BCE, the Maccabees recaptured Jerusalem. Not the whole city initially. The Seleucids held onto a fortress, but they took back the Temple Mount.
the temple, the place Antiochus had desecrated.
Exactly. And their first priority was to cleanse it, to purify it from the pagan rituals and the abomination Antiochus had committed.
And this cleansing, this rededication, this leads to Hanukkah.
Precisely. The Feast of Dedication, Hanukkah, commemorates this event. They cleansed the temple, rebuilt the altar according to Torah law, and wanted to relight the golden menorah, the lampstand that was supposed to burn continuously.
But there was a problem with the oil, right?
That's the tradition. They could only find one small flask of the specially consecrated olive oil needed for the menorah, enough to burn for just one day.
And it would take time to prepare more ritually pure oil.
8 days, according to the tradition. But miraculously, that one-day supply of oil burned for the full 8 days until new holy oil could be prepared.
The miracle of Hanukkah.
The miracle of the lights. So Hanukkah is an 8-day festival celebrating not just the military victory, but the restoration of worship, the miracle of the oil, God's faithfulness in preserving his people and his sanctuary. It's significant that even Jesus is noted as observing this feast in the Gospel of John.
Okay, now connect us back to the prophecies timeline. Daniel 8 had that strange number.
The 2300 evenings and mornings, yes. In verses 13 and 14, someone asks, essentially, how long will this desecration last? How long will the sanctuary be trampled?
And the answer is 2300 evenings and mornings. What does that mean?
Well, the most common interpretation, and the one that fits the history remarkably well, is that evenings and mornings refers to the 2 daily sacrifices, evening and morning. So 2300 sacrifices missed. That equates to 1150 full days.
1150 days. About 3 years and a couple of months.
Roughly, yes. Just over 3 years. And if you map that onto the historical period, from roughly when Antiochus intensified his persecution and stopped the daily sacrifices around 167 BCE, until the temple was cleansed and rededicated by Judah Maccabee in late 164 BCE, the time frame matches very closely.
So the prophecy didn't just predict the event of the desecration, but also gave a time frame for how long it would last.
It seems so. A specific, limited duration for this intense period of suffering and sacrilege. Imagine the hope that would give to those living through it, knowing God had set a boundary, an end date.
Incredible precision. And what about the end of Antiochus himself, the little horn?
Daniel 8.25 gives the final verdict on this prototype tyrant. It says he shall be broken, but by no human hand.
Meaning he wouldn't be killed in battle or assassinated.
Exactly. And history confirms this too. Antiochus V Epiphanes didn't die fighting the Maccabees or the Parthians or the Egyptians. He died suddenly in 164 BCE while on campaign in the east, apparently from a sudden severe illness. Some ancient sources describe it almost like a divine smiting.
Broken without human hand, just as prophesied.
It seals the picture. The rise, the specific actions, the duration of his peak tyranny, and the supernatural manner of his end all foretold centuries earlier.
Okay, let's pull back and look at the whole picture now. This chapter is just mind-blowing in its scope.
It really is.
We've traced this prophetic arc from the Medo-Persian ram through the lightning-fast Greek goat, the shattering of Alexander's horn, the rise of the 4 successor kingdoms.
To the focused tyranny of the little horn, Antiochus V, his desecration, the Maccabean revolt, and his predicted end. It's centuries of major world history laid out in advance.
And the overriding theme seems to be God's absolute control, his sovereignty over these massive empires and political shifts. The rise and fall of nations happens exactly on his schedule.
That's the macro-level takeaway, definitely. God is orchestrating history on a grand scale. But there's also a crucial micro-level lesson, especially in the figure of Antiochus V.
The little horn as a prototype.
Precisely. He serves as this incredibly detailed, historically grounded foreshadowing of the ultimate enemy of God and his people, the figure often called the Antichrist, who features in New Testament prophecy, especially Revelation.
What are the parallels?
Think about Antiochus's actions. Extreme arrogance and self-deification. Epiphanes' God-man effect. A fierce attack specifically against God's faithful people. Stopping true worship. Desecrating the holy place. Forcing a choice between allegiance to God and allegiance to the state or a false religion. Promoting a universal anti-God culture. All these things are expected to be mirrored, perhaps on an even grander scale, by the final Antichrist figure.
So understanding Antiochus helps us understand what to look for in the future.
It gives us a pattern, a historical anchor for understanding future prophecy. But this raises attention, doesn't it?
You mean if it's all preordained? Where does human choice fit in? Were the Maccabees just puppets?
That's the classic tension between divine sovereignty and human responsibility.
Yeah.
And the Bible seems to hold both in balance. God absolutely ordained the outcome. Persia would rise, Greece would conquer, Antiochus would desecrate, and it would be broken after a set time. The big picture was fixed. But how it played out involved real human choices, courage, faith, and resistance. Cyrus had to choose to issue the decree. The Jews had to choose to return and rebuild. Mattathias had to choose to resist. Judah Maccabee had to choose to fight. God didn't force them to be faithful. He worked through their faithfulness.
So God sets the stage, directs the overall flow, but our actions within that framework still matter profoundly.
Exactly. And that's where the encouragement comes for you, the listener, today. If God is managing global superpowers, timing the reigns of kings, orchestrating centuries of history with this kind of precision.
How much more is he capable of managing the details of my individual life?
Precisely. We get so anxious about current events, political turmoil, personal struggles. Daniel 8 is like a reality check. God is in control of the big picture. He's got this. Your anxieties, while understandable, are ultimately unnecessary if you trust his sovereign hand.
And look at the people in the story. Whether they lived under Babylonian oppression or Persian tolerance or Greek Hellenization or Seleucid tyranny, what really mattered?
Their heart, their faithfulness to God, their internal commitment. That was the constant, regardless of the external political circumstances. You could be faithful under oppression, or you could compromise even when things were relatively good. The core issue was always the heart's allegiance.
That's a powerful reminder. Our circumstances don't determine our faithfulness. Our choices do.
And that leads to the idea of stewardship. Our lives may be 80, 90, 100 years if we're lucky. They're just a blip in this vast historical timeline God is overseeing.
Feels insignificant sometimes.
It can feel that way. But the call is to be a good steward of the time and influence we do have, to connect our finite lives to God's eternal plan. The Maccabees faced maybe 3-4 years of intense persecution under Antiochus. They chose to make that short, brutal time count for eternity through their faithfulness and resistance.
So our small acts of faithfulness today, our refusal to compromise on core truths, our daily sacrifices of worship and obedience, they actually matter in God's grand narrative.
Daniel 8 shouts a resounding yes. God sees, he records, and he vindicates the faithfulness of his people, even when they feel small and overwhelmed by the horns of power in their own time. He set boundaries, and he remains in control. Hashtag, tag, outro. So we started this deep dive with Daniel's vision, these cryptic beasts and horns by a river.
Felt pretty abstract at first.
Right, and we've journeyed through centuries of documented history. We saw the rise of Medo-Persia and its policy shift, allowing the Jews home.
We saw the lightning conquest of Alexander the Great, spreading Greek language and culture everywhere.
The foundation for the New Testament spread. Then the breakup of his empire, setting the stage for conflict.
And culminating in that chilling prototype, Antiochus V Epiphanes, his attack on Jewish faith, the desecration of the temple.
And the courageous Maccabean revolt, leading to the miracle of Hanukkah.
The historical accuracy lining up with the prophetic details. It's just undeniable, isn't it? It really points beyond mere human foresight.
It speaks volumes about a sovereign God directing the course of history. Now that period under Antiochus, those roughly 3 years of intense persecution, it was a time of terrible suffering, pressure, and martyrdom for faithful Jews.
They faced an impossible choice. Compromise your faith to survive or stay true and risk everything.
The Maccabees, and many unknown others, chose faithfulness. They trusted God even unto death, believing he was still in control, that his plan would prevail. And the prophecy itself confirmed that even the worst persecutions have a time limit.
A boundary set by God.
Exactly. A defined end date within his larger plan.
So, as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Something based on everything we've seen in Daniel 8.
If God allows specific, intense periods of trial and opposition, but prophecy confirms these periods are always time-bound, they have a predetermined end.
And how does knowing that Knowing that even the bitterest suffering or the most oppressive system has an expiration date in God's plan, how does that knowledge change the way you choose to live right now?
How does it affect your courage, your faithfulness, your willingness to stand firm when faced with pressure or opposition in your own life, knowing it won't last forever?
Something to think about. Join us next time for another deep dive.